Okay, y'all. This episode is going to be a little different. It doesn't follow the sequential order or quite the through line or backstory plot kind of trajectory of what's going on in my journey through the Pantheos, right? I do this every now and then. I do this. I've done this with the astral projection episodes. They're kind of like these one-off kind of episodes. And I've went out of order sequentially, most recently with trip number 15. But I seriously have about a year and a half worth of backlogged material because I'm following this pattern of trip report and unpacking and then rinse and repeat, right? Trip report, unpacking, trip report, unpacking. And when amazing, like super enlightening things happen to me while that is in flux, right? I have to shelve these amazing, enlightening things and put them on the shelf, and they sit there collecting dust until the time is right to release them, if the time is ever right. And so I need to break that log jam. I need to break the mold, and that time is now. So with that being said, I need to catch you up on the last month and a half of what happened, what's been going on in my life. I am on day number 32 of a 45-day fast from my particular addiction. And if you don't know what that is, without getting too graphic, let's just say it's self-stimulation, if you know what I mean, and then things that fall within the periphery of that. So I've tried to hit the 30-day point. I haven't ever gone 30 days of not doing that particular thing since I mean, I'm not going to give you an age here, y'all, but I was very young when I started partaking in this particular kind of thing or whatever. And I've never been able to not do it for 30 days. And so here recently, I've been trying to hit that goal. When I say recently, probably like the last year or so. There's something about the number 30 that I'm trying to hit. And the longest I've gotten was 21 days. And that 21 days was on the, during the time that we're going through this incredibly hard struggle with IVF. I wanted to go into the confirmation ultrasound that was going to basically determine if our pregnancy was a viable pregnancy or not. There's this heartbeat ultrasound test that you go in there to hear the heartbeat and see the heartbeat of your developing embryo, and that's a sign that things are trucking along as they should be going. And I wanted to go into that with a tailwind of spiritual capital built up in the form of abstaining from my addiction, right? I had fasted with food for, I think, 10 days at one point. And that was kind of what I viewed as practice for the real show, so to speak, which is, you're really not sacrificing really much at all unless you're sacrificing the thing that you hold the most dear. And I think that if any addict is being honest with themselves, the thing that they hold most dear is their addiction, right? So that's what I wanted to sacrifice to gain as much spiritual capital as I could going into that ultrasound. And then, unfortunately, it didn't work. Okay. Despite all of the amazing signs and synchronicities that I was getting, that pointed towards there being a viable pregnancy and the embryo was going to have a heartbeat, it didn't. And we had a miscarriage, right? And because I had received all these kinds of signs that there would be a heartbeat and there wasn't, I, of course, took that very personal. Either God doesn't exist, and, the last 3 years have meant nothing. Okay, all the beauty and catharsis and saving my soul, like nothing, right? Or he does exist and is tormenting me and my wife, more importantly. So yeah, it broke me, to say the least. And regarding my 30-day abstinence goal, that was out the window. I mean, there's no need to abstain if God isn't real, or if he pulled the rug out from under you, y'all. It's not cool at all. And so I fell off the wagon hard. And I'll cover all of this in more detail in my unpacking episode that I'm working on right now. But long story short, don't worry, I'm back on the wagon. Okay, I rebuilt my castle and I'm cool with God. And again, here I am on day 32. I've eclipsed my previous unattainable goal by 2 days, okay? But that victory is not the real story here. The real story is my failed attempts and what I've learned along the way that made this attempt a success. And when I say failed attempts, y'all, I mean, so after my 21-day failure with the miscarriage and the falling off the wagon, I tried again for 30 days. I really just didn't like the person that I had become. Okay, regardless if God was real or not, or regardless if he was, pardon me, God, we're cool now. So this is the old anyway. So regardless if he was real or regardless if he was being a prick, okay, and tormenting me and my wife, letting go and slipping back into the void, the person that you become, y'all, utterly disgusting, revolting. It's as if I was having an out-of-body experience watching myself be this nasty person, and it infected every aspect and facet of my life. When my wife needed me the most, y'all, I withdrew. It's disgusting. And so again, regardless if God was real or not, or regardless if he singled me out and tormented me or not, I had slipped back into the old me, and it felt disgusting, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I wanted to try to hit that 30-day mark again and clean myself up. And so I tried, and I failed something like 7 different times to hit that 30-day mark. Even with help from one of my good friends, we even had this system where I would pay him like $50 if I slipped up. I owe that man $300. Okay. But the longest that I went, okay, into this 30-day goal was maybe 10 days, if memory serves here. But most of my failed attempts were something on the order of 2 days or 1 day, and then I would slip up. It was pathetic. And what I noticed, obviously, is these attempts were much, much harder than my previous attempts were, because I couldn't really rely on stuff. I couldn't lean on stuff. The only thing that I could lean on ultimately was myself. Literally every single other time that I had tried to abstain prior to and including this 21-day miscarriage abstinence failure, I was basically cheating, like a boxer or a football player or whatever, someone who you think is super awesome until you find out that they were on performance enhancers their whole career. I had basically the equivalent of that in the form of what I'm going to call artificial impetus, okay? Intense artificial impetus, okay? Basically, there were incredibly extreme, freaking earth-shattering carrots and sticks for me that influenced my behavior. I mean, after all, I saw heaven and hell and talked to God and all this stuff, y'all, on my experiences. It's really, really easy to make the right decision when you see hell or the face of God. You come down off of those experiences all amped up and ready to conquer the world. So it's much easier to abstain with those conditions. This time around, though, enough time had elapsed. I wasn't riding the wave of some epic mystical experience, so I couldn't really lean on that. I couldn't lean on my equivalent of performance enhancers. And since I'm fresh off of watching an episode of House of the Dragon a couple hours ago, I'm going to talk about this in relation to dragon slayers for a second. Okay, so let's say that there's a badass dragon slayer that everyone, including you, thinks is a total badass until you find out 2 things. Number 1, the dude took performance enhancers before slaying the dragon. Not heroic, in my opinion. But the real gut punch here is number 2. You find out that this badass dragon slayer, on top of being juiced to the gills, also had his back to a 1,000-foot cliff. Okay, so it's like he goes back a few feet and he's going to fall off the cliff. He had no choice but to fight the dragon in an act of desperation. Okay, now It depends on how you kind of look at that. Some would look at that scenario and think it's badass, kind of like Alexander the Great burning the boats, right? But not me, okay? Real courage doesn't and shouldn't come from desperation. So that's like a doubling down of performance enhancement right there. Not only did he take something that's juicing him all up, but he also, his performance is enhanced because he's going to die if he falls off the cliff. So that's going to make him fight even harder in an act of desperation. To me, this guy is looking more and more like a coward that's just at the right time, at the right place at the right time here. That was the equivalent of me on basically all of my previous failed attempts. But this time around, I didn't have that. That there wasn't a performance enhancer in the form of an influential psychedelic mystical experience induced impetus. Those typical carrots and sticks just weren't there. I couldn't lean on that. And another thing that I couldn't lean on was, how do I put this? Like tricks or hacks, right? So on every other previous attempt, I had tried to find these little psychological hacks that I could use and employ to basically trick myself into abstinence. Okay, I researched and tried just about everything that I could find or think of or whatever, and nothing worked. Okay, it was a big joke. And I'm actually glad, though, that nothing worked, because it taught me something incredibly valuable, and that's this. A hack is basically just another way of saying laziness, okay? It's a form of avoidance. It's trying to autopilot your way out of the fight for your life, okay? You can't just lean back and engage autopilot when you're fighting a dragon. Okay, so adding to this loser dragon slayer analogy, the dragon slayer now, okay, on top of being juiced to the gills and having no other choice but to fight the dragon, now let's say that he has a little button on his suit of armor or something that says kill dragon, and he pushes the kill dragon button, and I don't know, he turns into some kind of damn transformer or something, and there's an autopilot system that kills the dragon for him. Tell me again why I should think that this dragon slayer is even remotely close to being a badass. This dude's a coward. That was me. And so with all this stuff stripped away, what's left? There's no tailwind anymore of this intense impetus. Okay, there's no trick or hack that I can employ. The only thing left is you and your desire to do the right thing. And there's a shorthand way of saying what I just said, and that is willpower. And what is the root of willpower? Will. Okay, y'all? We got... How do I'm stumbling over my words, and I'm choking up here because of the significance of what I'm about to say here, y'all. It's free will is what I'm getting to here. Okay, the very instrument. I don't know if you've heard my story about this. Okay, I've mentioned it maybe a couple of times, maybe a few times on this channel. Free will was the very instrument, the tool, okay, that I used to disprove the existence of God Himself all those years ago. Okay, if you haven't heard the story, I was leaning towards atheism. I was kind of more agnostic until I had to write a term paper about free will for a philosophy class that I took in college. I, of course, now realize that my arguments in that paper were incomplete, but at the time, I logically disproved the existence of free will, and then through that, also logically disproved the existence of God, okay? And that logic, as flawed as I now know that it is, regardless, that was what I hung my hat on for 20 years. That was the catalyst. That's the excuse I needed, right? It's the reason that I became atheist, but most importantly, it is the reason that I became a nihilist. And further still, it's the reason that I let my addiction get so far out of control that I started going down a potentially unarrestable dark path. And now, all these years later, okay, in a brilliant stroke of poetic genius on the part of God, after discovering him through my quest to cure myself of the very addiction that got worse by rejecting him, he is now painstakingly helping me realize that he can only take me so far until I have to engage the very thing that I wielded against him, the very thing that by pretending didn't exist wrecked my life. The greatest gift he ever gave us, y'all, the last and most important piece of the puzzle here for me, the keystone, the last step poetically here, y'all, is that I have to engage my free will to slay the dragon. Nothing else will work. It was an incredibly beautiful and humbling lesson, and humbling not only because of the bitter irony, but also humbling because over those 20 years or so, taking the path of least resistance and churning on the hedonistic treadmill, the tiny bit of free will that I had left in me, I crammed all the way down into the very tip of my pinky toenail. And so when I tell you that this time around it was much, much harder, you had better believe me, okay? It was absolutely grueling. I had no help but myself, and that's exactly what I needed. Right from day one, I was tempted and almost caved. And, for the first 5 days, it was very much like that. I was so close to caving, y'all. And really about 7 days in, when I was jonesing real bad, that's kind of when all the synchronicities and these downright kind of hilarious jokes started happening. And probably the funniest little joke that happened was on day 7, as a last minute kind of thing, I was asked to work a VIP party, helping out with my wife's company that she works with. We do catering and stuff. Anyways, the party, get this, at the peak of my tension here of abstinence, from self-stimulation and whatnot, the party is for a bunch of smoking hot reality TV chicks, like all in their mid-20s to mid-30s. There wasn't a single woman in there, y'all, who was below an 8.5, okay? And then the DJ / singer / saxophonist shows up, and she's even hotter, y'all. I'm not joking. And they're all wearing like this, they look good, okay? They look really good, okay? But I was dying, y'all. I was absolutely freaking dying. And at one point in the party, I'm plating up a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and here comes the saxophonist, like going around the room, kind of interacting with people. And she comes up next to me and starts gyrating while I'm plating up these hors d'oeuvres. And I'm in my head, I'm like, woman, stop. Anyways, I was freaking dying, y'all. I mean, of all things, it had to be that. I've been doing catering for something like 3.5, 4 years now, something like that. Never once was it that I do a party anything like this. And there were a couple of other funny things here and there, and some micro synchronicities over the next week and a half or so. But the really interesting stuff, y'all, where it starts to get really serious here and unbelievable, in my opinion, started happening about 2 weeks ago.
And it all started with the number 13.
So before I forget it, I wanted to record what happened earlier today with this whole 1313 thing.
On the morning of June 22nd, 2024, I did what I normally do in the morning, and I caught up on all my social media.
The start of the story is that I'm scrolling through Instagram, and I come across this video.
Matthew, can I interrupt you right here? Sure. I happened upon a quite hilarious video.
Oh, hey, mommy, I'm a big boy, I pay you the rent.
Quite funny video, by the way.
I work at a job and I pay you the rent. Here you go.
And it was great. A therapist making fun of a patient, not knowing that the person he's telling this to is that patient.
Make me a PB&J because I'm a widow bitch.
That was me.
Really?
Yeah, we talked about it last week.
But it wasn't the hilarity of the video that captivated me.
I explained to you the rent system that my mother and I worked out, and you said it was a step in the right direction.
And it is.
Rather, it was a tiny detail about the Instagram post itself.
And it was 131,313 likes.
13.
And then I liked it. And I was the 131,314th like.
I was the person who broke the synchronicity.
And if you're curious, this video was getting likes very quickly.
The odds of me being that person are quite low, considering about a dozen or so likes are happening every second on this video.
By the time I went and revisited this video, which was only seconds later, it was already up to like 131,370 likes or some crap like that.
Keep in mind here, with the whole miscarriage thing, I had become very doubtful of synchronicity. But 3 13s in a row, and me being the split-second 13th person, I was compelled to do some research.
I go and type in 13, 13, 13, Bible, and I type that in.
And I'm still highly doubtful.
There's no way that I'm going to find anything of note.
I mean, after all.
Because usually it's 13, 13, and it's like chapter verse, right? What's the third 13,
But nonetheless, I get results.
Of course, I get 1 Corinthians 13:13, which is these three things remain: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest is love. That thing, right?
And I'm not impressed. Not only is this one of the most over-quoted verses in the Bible, but there's no third 13. We just got Corinthians 13:13.
So it's a little overdone and tired, right?
So I continue my hunt for the third 13.
Everything I'm seeing is just 13:13, but there's one specific article that pops out.
And that's when I found it.
There's one that pops out that says 13:13:13, the number of love. And it's this article about 1 Corinthians, chapter 13, y'all, which is exactly 13 verses long.
And the article discusses the profound richness of the definition of love offered in 1 Corinthians 13. But it also issues a challenge to the reader.
This article is saying, like, if you would really want to take it to the next level, you do what's called the 13-week challenge. And that's, you read 1 Corinthians 13, all 13 verses of it, every day for 13 weeks.
And so I cracked open my Bible to read that chapter.
I was like, that sounds great.
If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal.
A chapter that I had read before, but never analytically.
And if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing.
This time I'm reading it with fresh eyes, with this struggle I'm going through, this really deep, hard struggle of trying to make 30 days of abstinence from my addiction.
Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast.
And much to my surprise, the words that I read were the same words I was saying in my podcast that I was recording that very day.
For we know in part, and we prophesy in part.
The magic of this, though, is I'm doing a podcast episode that deals specifically with transcendence.
But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears.
And then even more specifically with this thought of God has the perfect thought form in his head, and everything.
Basically, the idea goes like this. Everything in physical existence is imperfect because imperfection is the only way that something can exist in the first place.
Perfection cancels itself out in the physical.
Everything is imperfect, and on top of that, a paradox. However, all imperfection and all paradox is resolved at the source, which is God.
We are going to be merged into the perfect thought form,
but we can never know what that would look like because we can only comprehend the source through our imperfect, paradoxical nature and existence.
For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face.
And don't worry, I'm going to do a full deep dive episode on this that is going to be absolutely epic. But 1 Corinthians 13 basically said all of that in a nutshell, and it had me a little weirded out, honestly.
Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known.
And here is 1 Corinthians 13 saying specifically that. You read that and you tell me that it is not saying that we have a partial understanding of what it is and that one day our understanding will become whole. It's exactly what it's freaking saying. And that is amazing enough, but then today happens, y'all. And I am doing good. Yesterday was a day where this stuff did not touch me. Like when I say this stuff, I mean, I'm trying to abstain from my addiction, and I've had an incredibly freaking hard battle the past 4 days, or those 4 days prior. Yesterday was a great day. It didn't touch me. It didn't even come close. And then today, it was the same energy. I was rolling through today with a bunch of energy. And y'all, TMI, and I apologize, I was in a place of seclusion, and I had my phone in my hand. And I started to get onto Google to type in into the image search something that, let's just say, would get my juices flowing. And as I am about to hit go, or the search button, or whatever, my friend Mario texts me a YouTube video that says, "Do you have the courage to try it?" And he sent it by accident, y'all. It's a video of this incredibly crazy ride somewhere where it's like one of those drop rides or whatever, and people are being slung around on these, like, it looks terrifying. I'm like, I'm not a roller coaster guy, never have been, never will be. I'm like, why is Mario sending this to me? But it was very pertinent, because I had a moment of weakness, and I was about to hit search, and I was about to go down a rabbit hole, and I got slapped in the face with, "Do you have the courage to try it?" And then homeboy sends me the correct thing, what he wanted to really send, which is why 13. The question mark. It's a YouTube video, and I'll play it for you here. It's basically someone writes all the numbers in a clock, not a digital clock, an analog clock that, where the hands go around, and he starts circling the numbers, the adjacent numbers that are next to each other, and every single one of these numbers, when you go across from each other, as you're seeing here, they all add up to 13. It's just a coincidence, right? It's just, if we arranged the numbers differently, it wouldn't be like that. But again, my point is that right when I had that moment, I get, "Are you man enough to have the courage?" And then I get another 13 reference. But here's the crazier part, y'all. That message he sent was the 13th unchecked message. And there, you're seeing a screenshot of that too in the moment, right when he saw. And I'll show you the timestamps here, so we can all agree this happened, y'all. And I reread. I hadn't reread. I was going to reread 1 Corinthians 13 that day. I hadn't yet, and I was like, okay, no, I'm doing it. I'm gonna read it, and I read it. And, each time I read it, I pick up on something different. And this time the part, people always quote this also. And this is one of these over-quoted verses, y'all. But over-quoted verses, are over-quoted for a reason, because they're quite freaking profound. I mean, we get, when I was a child, I
talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me.
And that's basically what happened, y'all. I was about to succumb to a childish way of thinking, a way of behaving, a way of life. And God stepped in with his synchronicities and his signs and wonders for all the people out there who say that you shouldn't go by signs and wonders. Well, tell me how this is dangerous or destructive or irresponsible. God is sitting here. You can call it the Holy Spirit. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it serendipity. You can call it pure coincidence. I don't give a crap. Pure coincidence pointed me towards the answer of love itself. And love being this transcendent power, a cosmic, hypercosmic spiritual force that we only know partially.
To say that I was blown away by that series of overlapping synchronicities is an understatement, y'all. But if you think that's all of the story here, just listen up, because this is where things start to get really creepy. So, I'm doing my fast, good days and bad, okay, but I'm holding strong, still on target for the 30-day goal. And I'm, of course, reading 1 Corinthians 13 daily, until one day, I was very busy and I stayed up late, and I looked down at the time right before I went to bed and saw that it was 12:30 a.m. I had missed my window. I forgot to read 1 Corinthians 13. And so to compensate for that hiccup, I decided to read 1 Corinthians 13 times in a row. I don't know how I came up with that. There was nothing like that in the article that says, what you're supposed to do when you miss a day or whatever. I just came up with it on the spot and rolled with it. And so that's what I did. I sequestered myself and I read it 13 times in a row. And when I was done, I brushed my teeth, went to bed, and then woke up hours later and checked my phone to see what time it was. And that's when I saw this. The Bible app verse of the day, which is the same verse for everyone in the world who has the app. In other words, it wasn't tailored for me. Out of the 31,102 verses in the Bible, the verse of the day was 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is patient, love
is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud.
Mere freaking hours after I had read that 13 times in a row. And then the next day, not as amazing because they just went with the next verse. Sometimes they do that if there's a theme. The next verse of the day was 1 Corinthians 13:5. It does not dishonor
others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs.
And then the next day, a day in which I began filming an independent film, that'll be pertinent later, the verse of the day was 1 Corinthians 13:6. Love does not delight
in evil, but rejoices with the truth.
Again, not as amazing as the original one a few days before that, but then something really freaking crazy happened. A little later that day, while filming this movie, I told one of the actors to improvise a line just to add variety to the scene. And this is what that actor, an atheist, y'all, who's in a movie that is not even remotely biblical, this is what he improvises.
I'm doing a little online gaming. Can you come back some other time, please?
Gaming. Yeah, I used to game too, back when I thought like a child, acted like a child, and spoke like a child, but then I put away childish things when I became a man.
Nobody prompted him with anything, y'all. Anything. And sure, I love to tell people about my synchronicities that I experience, but I wouldn't dare tell that guy, because this is the very guy that I clashed with the hardest out of the 3 friends of mine whom I got into a yelling debate with about God at my bachelor party 3 years ago. That's the guy, and he is an atheist. Why would he suddenly be quoting 1 Corinthians 13 in a comedy horror movie when asked to improvise a line? Crazy, right? I mean, it took everything in the moment for me not to drop the camera and collapse onto the floor in a pile of mush right then and there. But if you think that's the craziest part, get ready. So a couple days later, I finally finished that movie, and I finally get a chance to record a voice memo of everything I remembered about all of these 1313 synchronicities and 1 Corinthians, all of that.
I had been getting a lot of synchronicities around the number 13.
And I get to the part in this recording about this actor friend of mine. Yes, we're still friends, by the way.
There's a friend of mine there.
But I talk about how we had this clash before.
A friend of mine who was actually involved in that giant clash.
And I specifically mentioned the word collision.
Anyways, me and this guy had a collision of belief.
Fast forward about an hour later, and I'm in my car driving to meet my dad for lunch. And I'm listening to that very voice memo that I just recorded. And right at that exact moment in the recording when I said the word collision.
Anyways, me and this guy had a collision.
Boom. A car crash happens right in front of me, about 20 yards in front of me.
Y'all, no joke. I was listening to my, anyway, there's a collision here with a few people that just happened.
And yes, if you're watching this on YouTube, what you're seeing is the aftermath of that collision. You can see everyone is okay. It was a low-speed situation, but still, what in the hell?
I'm listening to that recording, and right when I mentioned that, like I said, we had a collision. There was a freaking car collision that happened, and I just filmed it. No joke, it just happened.
But we're still not done. I went on to the restaurant. My dad was already there sitting at a table. I sat down. I started telling him about all of these synchronicities, the collision, 1 Corinthians, and the number 13, and that's when I noticed.
So I'm having margs with my dad here at this restaurant. Guess what table I sat at? Didn't plan on this. Didn't plan on it at all. 13. No joke. I got here and my dad was already sitting here at table 13. So I didn't choose anything. Like, he was here. And it was into our conversation when I finally noticed that we were at table 13. I mean, it's a little thing, but considering everything else that's happened today, it's not a little thing.
I've had a lot of crazy synchronicities, y'all, but that one, it's in the top. I mean, I don't know if I can give it a ranking per se because there have been so many just absolutely epic ones. I mean, there was a car crash on this one, y'all, but on another one, 2 people died. 2 people, and then a horse got injured. And then there's, of course, the ones surrounding my friend who passed away, who visited me in a dream, and then like stuff he said in that dream ended up being like real in real life. And then there's like the one with my uncle who passed away, who I saw on a psychedelic experience. And then there's the story about, borrowing a jacket, and then someone asked to borrow my jacket that very day. Like that the whole thing, y'all, was just absolutely amazing. And I'm not doing it credit by just glossing it over really quickly. If you haven't heard these epic, unbelievable synchronicities, y'all, you got to go check them out. It's unbelievable. In my opinion, they cannot be described rationally except to just throw up your hands and say, oh, it's just coincidence. Blah, blah, freaking blah, y'all. But anyway, so all this amazing synchronicity stuff had kind of started to quell a little bit. I'm still trudging through my abstinence from my addiction. Things are going along pretty smoothly, but then came this kind of out of the blue deep thought that I had while I was watching, of all things, a TV show. And if you're wondering what the TV show, it's the show The Bear on, I think it's FX or something like that, but I see it on Hulu. Anyway, really good show. But there's this one episode on season 2, really intense, where the main character goes, it's like kind of like a flashback, and he goes to his family's house to have like a Christmas kind of dinner kind of thing. And it's incredibly tense, incredibly taut. The directors and producers and all that, and the actors and everything, and the editors, they all do a really good job of, I don't know, it's just really tense and nerve-wracking, but yet still a comedy. It really reminds me of this movie called Very Bad Things. Really good example of that comedy tension that you just want to rip your eyeballs out. But this episode is just fraught with that. I mean, just really, really intense. And there's so much family drama. Like, one of the brothers and an uncle are just at each other's throats. And there's a lot of like family bullying and picking on people and stuff going on. But there was this one part that really kind of leapt out at me. I'm always scanning my environment. Ever since I found God, and I found God through synchronicity and all this stuff, I'm always scanning my environment for clues or kind of like hints towards like, hey, this might be a God thing. And specifically when I watch television shows, I try to look at it as if, is there some kind of God symbolism here that I can kind of extract from what I'm watching? And lo and behold, there's this part where Jamie Lee Curtis, the mother, is in the kitchen just absolutely beside herself. She's been kind of wrangling her absolutely chaotic family the whole time, cursing and like trying to cook stuff and like just having to put up with people that want to kill each other in the same household. And so she's in the kitchen by herself, looking up at the ceiling, smoking a cigarette in a state of just utter exasperation, but an exasperation that borders on resignation at the same time. It's kind of like she's just kind of given up, right? And the main character walks in to try to console her. And there's this moment, again, where it's like as if I was hearing the voice of God, where he said, "Hey, what's going on? And are you okay?" Kind of thing. And she said something to the effect of, "No, I'm not okay." And he's like, "Well, what's up?" And she says, all these times, all these Christmases, everything that I do for every one of y'all, I make all of this beautiful stuff, and nobody makes anything beautiful for me." And she is crying her eyeballs out at this point, smoking her cigarette. And I had this feeling of, oh dear, like, oh no, like if this is God talking, then this is very sad. And I better drop everything I'm doing right now and give God praise and worship. God has told me on several occasions and made it clear to me and shown me that he feels pain through us, right? And so God is capable of feeling these thoughts, of being sad and feeling pain. And so I clued in very hard on that one. I put a mental bookmark there and then kind of tried to see where the rest of the episode would evolve to. Hopefully something amazing happens with God and there's some closure to this kind of sad part. But what happens instead is the brother and the uncle who are at each other's throats, it gets incredibly vile at the table. I'm talking like it's getting really nasty, and the mom's still in the kitchen, right? So God basically is still in the kitchen. And there's this moment at this table, again, I'm always observing and trying to relate things to God and then the nature of reality or the state of the world. And there's this moment where the brother and the uncle are at each other's throats. They're literally throwing cutlery at each other and such like that. And there are other people at the table that are like, "Hey, please stop." There are other people at this table who are wanting to have a nice time and you guys are ruining it and this is getting out of hand. And then, I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of the state of the world right now. I mean, the brother and the uncle, you could think of them as Israel and Gaza, or Russia and Ukraine, or how about this one, y'all? Biden supporters and Trump supporters, Republicans and Democrats, right? But in reality, you can really throw any conflict in here. These micro conflicts that you have in your own life, y'all, all of this is kind of embodied and represented and symbolized here at this table. And I just looked at this as like, oh no, this is really bad. Things are about to get really, really bad. But then I remembered the mom, okay, God, is still in the kitchen. What happens when she comes in? What is she going to do? And then she comes in. And it's something about her presence and everyone knowing what she's done all day, slaving in the kitchen and cooking for them, and knowing how hard she worked and the amount of love that she put into it. Even though she was yelling and screaming, she did this all out of love. Everyone stops, including the brother and the uncle. There's this quietness and they're all kind of looking at her, and someone says something that sets her off. And then she becomes the person who is the most violent person at the table. And, throwing plates and breaking plates and cussing at every single person, calling everyone out on the carpet kind of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no, if this is what God is going to do in reaction to this, this is not good. Okay. And so she storms off because she's upset. And because she storms off, now it's time for the uncle and the brother to go at each other for real. And they get up and they start like fighting for real. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a crash. The mother went outside to the driveway and drove her car through the freaking living room. And so now I'm absolutely scared shitless. I'm like, okay, God is telling me, basically, in a way. And I know I shouldn't read too far into television shows, but y'all, we got to think about this kind of stuff and analyze it, in my opinion. But I'm thinking to myself, this all started with God not feeling appreciated, right? He makes beautiful things for us, but we don't do beautiful things for him in return. And so my brain started going to praise and worship, and how we had better praise and worship him lest he get in his cosmic car and drive that cosmic car through our cosmic living room and, just wait and see what happens next kind of thing. And if I'm being honest with myself here, and if Christians are being honest with themselves too, that is a big narrative of what is likely going to happen, quote unquote, likely going to happen when quote unquote Armageddon quote unquote happens, right? And right before I started to freak out, and I was creeped out and I was worried, but right before I started to freak out, I remembered everything I learned in the past month. 1 Corinthians 13 shoved down my throat every day, and then synchronicity upon synchronicity upon synchronicity, alluding back to 1 Corinthians 13 and how love is like the ultimate thing, and there's a higher form of love that you can never comprehend. And then I bounced this whole scene with the mother and the family and the car and all that stuff. I bounced that off of that whole concept of love. And I recorded a voice memo, and I'm going to close with this voice memo. And my friend Ben, who has helped me tremendously, like, y'all, you have no idea how honored I am to have this man as my friend, and he helped me so much in the past, well, for a long time, but specifically in the past few months to help me get over this stuff, y'all, and try to hit that 30-day mark. And he's been there freaking every day for me. And when you talk about love, y'all, I mean, I don't know him personally. I just know him through phone calls and stuff and texts, and we've had some Zoom meetings and stuff. But from what I can gather of this man, there is no hateful or vengeful or mean bone in his body. If we're talking about 1 Corinthians 13, this guy embodies that, okay? Nothing but love. Anyway, this one's for you, buddy. Here we go.
Question for Ben: Why should we give praise? Well, first of all, question to him is: do you give praise? If so, why? And if not, why not? But if you do give praise, and if you don't believe in this whole selfishness of Yahweh demanding okay. So it's not demanding. It's not like, hey, this is what I've done for you. Why haven't you done something for me? It's not that. It could be that. And just like everything in the universe that's a paradox, there's two ways of looking at that single thing, which is praise, worship. There's a jealousy side of the coin, and that's the negative, that's the evil side. And then there's another side of it. And what is that? The opposite of jealousy. What is the opposite of jealousy? What is the opposite of jealousy? The opposite of jealousy is trust. But it's not only that. It's so hilarious how simple jealousy is. Jealousy is just jealousy. But the opposite of jealousy is way more complex. Because it's trust, but it's not only that. It's not only trust. If I'm diving as deep as I can into jealousy, it's like, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it's usually because the person who's jealous is doing those things. And they can't have you doing that to them. But we're going to table that. The opposite of jealousy is trust, but it is also because you can still love someone and be jealous of them. So it's the opposite of jealousy is not love. The opposite of jealousy is trust. I love and made you my son. Maybe you don't truly love someone that you're jealous of. Maybe that's it. Maybe the opposite of jealousy is trust and love. And maybe through love, okay. Through love, there is trust. And so love is the central source of it all. And then there's trust that blossoms from that, of course. If you're jealous of something, if you're jealous of someone, you don't truly love them. Because love is, what does it say? Let's go to the Bible here. I'm sorry to go to the Bible for those of you who are, I used to cringe at it too. Where is it? Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. This is a blueprint, y'all. This is an absolute blueprint. This whole I am a jealous God thing reeks of the opposite of what this is saying. We don't give praise and worship because of jealousy, because it's look what I did for you and you didn't do for me. That is not what that is saying. If there's anything that I have learned in the past month of cramming this Bible chapter down my throat every day and having synchronicities overlapping one on top of the other to the point of someone getting in a car crash. Thankfully, everyone was okay. It just damaged the cars only. But if there's anything that I learned from the past month, being steeped in this Bible chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, it is that love is not jealous. Period. It's not a matter of look what I've done for you and you haven't done for me. Flush that down the toilet where it belongs. Throw it in the gutter. Don't throw it. Love your enemy. But we do have a trash can for things that don't serve us anymore. You can love something as you're throwing it in the trash and say, do better as you're throwing it away. I would gladly welcome you back. So I don't need to ask my friend Ben about why he gives praise. I know now. It's because all it is a reciprocation of love. That's it. Let me try to best you on how much love you give me, and let's try to best each other in this one-upsmanship competition of love. That's what praise and worship is. Again, it harkens back to this obedience thing. It's what Jesus told me. I obey you and you obey me, and my obedience back to you is tenfold what you obeyed to me, because this is all a love thing. Hello. It shouldn't be based on fear. It should be based on, I can't wait to get up and give you a big, wet, sloppy kiss in the morning. It's not a, oh my God, if I don't give you a wet, sloppy kiss, I'm going to get smacked in the face. No. Nope. There it is. All right, I'm going to go to bed. Give my wife a big, wet, sloppy kiss. And then I'm going to wake up at 4 in the morning and pray to God, standing prayer, and give him a big, wet, sloppy kiss, or the metaphoric prayer version of that. Not because he demands it, because he deserves it, because we both deserve it, because love is love, and, let her rip.
So that's it. Thank you all very much for listening. I love every single one of you. And stay tuned for the next episode, which will be the unpacking for trip number 15, the trip that broke me. It is going to be absolutely freaking epic. And then after that, y'all, things just keep getting more and more epic. So stay tuned and spread the love. Peace.